This is Packet Tracer Exercise 2.9.1 from the CCNA Cisco series. Now, I want you to be aware on 2.9.1 that you might get a different layout and different information depending on just the random one that you happen to get when you bring this up. You might have different IP addresses, different names of devices. They may be laid out in a different layout. You might have different password information. So it all depends on which one you get. As a matter of fact, if I go up here to File and then click Reset Activity, click OK, you'll notice that this thing changes again. Let's do it one more time. So you'll see different layouts like that, different names, different IP addresses in this table, and that kind of thing. All right, let me get this thing laid out the way I want to lay it out for this activity, and let's get started. This addressing table we will use in order to put addresses on these devices. The objectives to configure host names and IP addresses on these switches. We'll also put IP addresses on these PCs. We'll use some iOS commands to limit access, such as the console access and so on. To save the running configuration, we'll configure the host devices here with IP addresses, and then we'll verify connectivity between the two PC end devices. In other words, from manager to reception, from reception to manager. I want to read this scenario for you because there's an important point I want to make after I read it. As a recently hired LAN technician, your network manager has asked you to demonstrate your ability to configure a small LAN. Your tasks include configuring initial settings on the switches, configuring IP addresses, and you'll use the 2 switches and 2 host PCs on a cable-powered network. The point I want to make about this is not an unusual kind of thing that you might actually see during an interview. If you interview for a networking job, it's not uncommon to be asked to do some basic setups on devices. It's also not uncommon to get subnetting questions to see if you can subnet and if you know what you're doing with IP addresses. So please be prepared if you ever go in for a networking job interview for this kind of activity. So your instructions are simple enough. Configure the devices to fulfill the requirements below. Number 1, we're going to use a console connection to access each switch. If I were to click on these switches, let's click on this switch over here, you notice that it's locked. I cannot configure this switch directly from here. What we want to do is a more realistic look. Remember that these switches don't have keyboards, they don't have monitors or screens to look at, so you have to plug a PC or a laptop into them in order to configure them. So this is how it actually works in the real world. Let's take a look at what these things look like. Older PCs and laptops have an RS-232 port on them. And the original rollover cable. Now, a rollover cable is a special Cisco cable. All these blue flat cables like this are special Cisco cables. You can't just pick any cable that has these ends on it and expect it to work. What a rollover cable looks like is that pin 1 goes to pin 8, pin 2 goes to pin 7, and so on. So this one has the RS-232 plug and an RJ45 plug. So the RS-232 plug will go here onto the PC, and then this RJ45 will go into the console port on the switch. Now today, since we don't have these RS-232 ports as commonly, we now have some rollover cables that have a USB plug on this side and the RJ45. So this would go into the USB port on the PC, and again, this RJ45 would go into that console port. We also have today rollover cables that have the USB at both ends if you have a USB console port on the switch. All right, let's get back to this and let's figure out how we're going to do this. What we're going to do is choose this lightning bolt down here, and then we're going to choose this rollover cable, this blue cable. I'm going to click that, I'll click the PC, and I'll choose the RS-232 port. And then over here on room 145, I will click the console port. Let's do the same thing again on this side from this reception PC to the room 146 console port. And there we go. Now we're ready to roll to do these things. So the first thing we want to do is to name room 145 and room 146 switches. We want to put a host name on these things. So I'll click the Manager PC, which will get me to this room 145. And now I'm going to choose the desktop and then the terminal. This is the application, the software, PuTTY or one of those softwares that will give me terminal access to this guy. So I'll click terminal and then I'll click OK, and now I'm in this room 146 configuration. Now I want to put a name, room 145. I said 146, didn't I? Room 145. I want to put that name on here. I'm going to click enter. I need to get into privilege exec mode. So I'll type enable, and I need to get into global config mode, so I'll type conf space t, conf t, which means configure terminal, and now I'm ready to name this device room 145. So host name, room-145. There we go. We're now at 4%. Let's do the same thing for this reception and room 146. I'll click that PC, desktop, terminal, OK. I'll click enter, enable, conf t, and now host name, room-146. All right, we're up to 9% now. Next, we want to add this password to the console line here. So I'm going to just type line con 0. That gets me into the configuration mode for the console line. And I'll put this password on it, password. And I want this to be a small x, a capital A, a small w, a 6, and a small K. There we go. Now remember, whenever we put a password on the console line, we have to use the login command. So I'll type login. All right, let's do the same thing then for this room 145 switch. I'll go back to the manager there. Line con 0. Password, small x, capital A, small w, 6, and small k. And don't forget login. By the way, these are the kinds of things that can trip you up. If you were to do this during an interview and you just don't know to put the login command and it doesn't tell you specifically to do that in your instructions, you might miss something. So you just have to remember, do the login command. All right, now we want to put this secret password on the enable command. So let's exit to go back one level. Oops, let's try that again. Exit, go back one level. And I want to do enable secret. And now we want a 6, a capital E, a capital B, a capital U, and a small p. Now we'll do the same thing on the other one over here. So I need to exit to get back to global config mode. Enable secret. And let's see if we can do this again. 6, capital E, capital B, capital U, small p. There we go. We're up to 27%. Now we want to encrypt all clear text passwords. So you may remember or may not remember, that is service password dash encryption. And we'll do the same thing on the other one, the manager one over here. Service password encryption. There we go. Now we want to configure an appropriate message of the day banner. We're already in global config mode, so banner motd. I'll start with, a $, and I'll say unauthorized access prohibited, and then the $. Again, I'll click enter. All right, let's do the same thing on the other one. Banner, motd, $, unauthorized access prohibited, $, to end it. And there we go. Now we want to configure addressing for all the devices according to the addressing table up here. All right, let's move that over a little bit so we can see a little bit better. I'll move this over just a hair. Let's start with this reception PC. So I'm going to get out of this desktop thing here. Move that over here. There we go. I'm going to get out of that, and I'm going to go to IP addressing. And the reception PC IP address is 10.10.10.5, 10.10.10.5, and the subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. Well, it's going to suggest 255.0.0.0 because of this 10, because it's a Class A address. But we're using classless addresses, so we can change that. 255.255.255.0. So we're good there. Now let's do the room 146. So let's get out of here and go back to the terminal. And we need to get into, remember, VLAN 1. So interface VLAN 1. And we want to put IP address, and for 146 it's 10.10.10.150, 10.10.10.150, a space, and then the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. All right. Now one more thing, remember VLANs they're not open by default. The other ports are, but these virtual ports are not running by default. So I have to do a no shutdown. And that brings that state to up. All right, let's go over here to the manager computer. I will get out of this thing and go into the IP configuration. Manager is 10.10.10.4. So 10.10.10.4 and 255.255.255.0. Good. Let's go to the terminal. And I need to go into the VLAN. So interface VLAN 1. And now, let me see, IP address. This is room 145, right? So we want 10.10.10.100. 10.10.10.100. 255.255.255.0. Don't forget the space between the two. And again, we have to be sure we do the no shut or no shutdown. There we go. What's next? Save your configurations. All right. In order to save the configuration, we need to get back to privileged exec mode. Now we could do exit to get us out of the interface config, and then exit again to get out of global config, but we can also use end. So just end will get us back to global config mode. And now we can do our copy, run, start. And we have to hit enter again to confirm. And there we are. Now let's do the other one. So let's do end. And now copy, run, start. And hit enter again to confirm. And we are at 100%. However, we really should check connectivity between the devices. Let's go ahead and go to Manager, Command Prompt, and I will ping. Let's see, let's ping the reception. So 10.10.10.5. And there it goes. Look at that. We have activity. Let's ping room 146. Let's try that. So I'm going to ping 10.10.10.150. Now when we're pinging the switches, it's not uncommon for the first ping to fail, but then it should pick up and take off, just like it just now did. All right, that's looking good. If you really want to see all of them run, we can do it a second time. I'll hit the up arrow on the keyboard and press enter again, and sure enough, it's going to do all 4 of them. All right, so everything looks like it's running correctly. I didn't do both of the switches, but it looks like everything's connecting fine. All right, so that's it. That's the end of this lab. Again, here's a reminder that if you reset activity, all these things are going to change. File, reset activity, OK, and you'll see, well, in this case, it looks like it's pretty much the same. That's kind of unusual for that to happen. I'll do it one more time. There we go. Now we have student 1, student 2, class A, class B. We have different passwords down here. We have different IP addresses up here. Now, same IP addresses in this case. That could change as well. So that's the idea. Good job.